In the frigid, endless waters of the Irish Sea, the fortunate, or perhaps unfortunate, depending on how you see it, hero of this tale is Cacus, a fisherman who rises early each morning as if fish adhered to a strict schedule, all to keep his family afloat, metaphorically, of course. One morning, while casting his nets with more hope than bait, the sea delivers him a surprise. In the first net he hauls, he finds not only fish, but a beautiful, half-drowned woman tangled within. Clearly alarmed but alert, Cacus approaches cautiously. He knows this can't be a recreational diver. The coast is too distant, and few dare to venture alone into these waters. To his relief, the woman seems unharmed, though visibly shaken. Her composure nearly snaps into fury when Cacus mentions calling the authorities. Through pleas and little white lies, she convinces him not to call anyone, insisting that it's safer if their encounter remains their secret. Swayed, Cacus agrees and offers her a place to stay, a secluded old cabin that, while remote, is remarkably cozy. Suddenly, Cacus informs her that he has to leave to attend to something important, but promises to return soon to check on her. In town, he arrives at his ex-wife Maura's house, reproaching her for drinking while caring for their daughter Annie. Gently, he takes Annie with him. Young Annie suffers from a serious kidney condition, requiring weekly dialysis to stay stable. This time together is precious for Cacus, as it allows him to share stories with her, including the tale of a beautiful woman who appeared in his fishing net. When Annie finishes her dialysis session, the hospital surprises her with a new electric wheelchair, something she's never seen before, and she's thrilled. After dropping his daughter back at her mother's house, Cacus returns to the sea and finds the mysterious woman once again. This time, she trusts him enough to reveal her name, Ondine. As they sail, Ondine watches him at work, though his efforts yield no catch. She begins singing softly to the waters and asks Cacus to leave his traps in a little longer. With nothing to lose, he agrees, and miraculously, the traps overflow with massive lobsters. Each trap appears like a marine miracle, bursting with lobsters. Not one to question his sudden good fortune, he simply relishes it. Back on land with his bounty, Cacus invites Ondine to the market to show her how seafood can be transformed into cash. However, she declines, saying she prefers to keep a low profile. Respecting her wishes, he heads to town alone, promising to return soon. After selling the lobsters, he uses some of the money to buy clothes for Ondine, then picks up Annie from school. Their bond is special, and they race each other down the street while talking. Annie pleads with her father to continue the story of the woman from the sea, so he recounts his day's adventures as if it were a fairy tale. After dropping Annie off at her mother's, Cacus returns to the docks. But unbeknownst to him, Annie, noticing her father's rare smile, decides to follow him, curious to uncover what he's hiding. Back at the cabin, Cacus hands Ondine the clothes and some food he brought, to which she responds by giving him a quick kiss on the cheek. Feeling either embarrassed or perhaps something deeper, he steps outside to let her change and eat. At that moment, Annie, who has trekked 8 kilometers, spots her father talking to someone in the cabin. Intrigued but cautious, she heads to the library instead, where she reads about mermaids, suspecting that her father's mysterious guest might be linked to these legends. The next day, when her father is away, Annie visits the cabin and finds Ondine swimming near the shore. She introduces herself, and after a few minutes of conversation, they become fast friends. Annie, convinced that Ondine is a mermaid, suggests that she's only on land because she lost her mermaid cloak, offering to help find it. Ondine grows anxious, possibly because Annie might be right and could expose her. However, Annie assures her she would never tell anyone. In truth, she has no friends at school and doesn't speak to anyone there. Elsewhere, a mysterious man stands by the ocean, watching intently, his intentions unclear but seemingly ominous. The following morning, Ondine enjoys a quiet moment on a small raft when Cacus invites her to join him for another fishing trip, convinced she brings him luck. After a brief lesson, Ondine takes the helm, her unique piloting style awakening long-suppressed feelings in Cacus. While steering, she hums a haunting tune, casting a mysterious atmosphere. Suddenly, the boat tips under the weight of an unexpected haul of fish. Just then, some naval officers approach to inspect the boat, suspicious of Cacus's too-good-to-be-true luck. They thoroughly search the vessel until they find Ondine hidden below deck. She assures them nothing illegal is happening, and seemingly charmed, the officers believe her and leave. After they depart, Cacus notices Ondine is visibly shaken, terrified by their presence, and expresses her desire to avoid such encounters in the future. Trying to comfort her, he reminds her of the old saying that facing one's fears is the only way to overcome them. He invites her to the market, promising to stay by her side every step of the way. At the market, Ondine's beauty draws everyone's attention. Even Cacus's fish buyer pays him extra, charmed by his stunning companion. Later, Cacus takes his girls shopping, with Annie helping Ondine choose clothes that don't look like they came from a lost and found box. As the days pass, Ondine and Annie grow closer. One day, Annie leaves her wheelchair by the shore and joins Ondine in the water, where Ondine promises to teach her to swim, without Cacus finding out, of course. While playing in the water, Ondine steps on something unusual and discovers her mermaid cloak buried beneath the waves, overwhelmed by joy. Annie, who has come to see Ondine as not only a friend, but a potential mother figure, suggests that Ondine bury the cloak. According to a legend she read, doing so would allow her to remain on land for 7 years. After some thought, Ondine agrees, and they bury the cloak in an abandoned, covered garden. When Cacus returns, the girls keep their secret and ask him to take them to the town festival. At the docks, we finally see the face of the mysterious man, Vadik. Determined to prove her theory, Annie wheels herself to the edge of the pier and plunges into the water in front of everyone. Without hesitation, Ondine dives in to rescue her, pulling her to safety. In that moment, everyone witnesses Ondine's ability to hold her breath underwater for an unusually long time, a trait that doesn't go unnoticed. Back at the cabin, the conversation between Cacus and Ondine takes a serious turn. He opens up about his past, admitting he struggled with alcoholism, a vice that ultimately cost him custody of his daughter. His ex-wife, Maura, managed to secure full custody of Annie, despite being just as heavy a drinker. Cacus admits that his luck had seemed to abandon him years ago, but has started turning around since Ondine entered his life. After this heartfelt exchange, emotions take over, and they end up sharing an intimate moment. The next day after church, Cacus is approached by Vadik, who bombards him with questions about Ondine. Cacus dismisses him and leaves. Later, he takes Annie for her dialysis session. When they return to her mother's house, they find no one home. He searches for Maura to ask if Annie can spend the night with him, but she barely acknowledges him, too absorbed in drinking and playing pool with her new boyfriend. Cacus returns to the cabin, only to find it in disarray, as if a tornado had struck. Panicked, he searches for Ondine and eventually finds her hiding in a small riverside cave. In the darkness, she explains that Vadik is her husband, and he's come to take her back. The calm between Cacus and Ondine soon turns to tragedy as we see Vadik recklessly speeding through town, hunting for his wife. In his frenzy, he crashes into Maura and her boyfriend, who were irresponsibly driving while drunk, with innocent Annie in the back seat. Upon hearing what happened, Cacus rushes back to town. Thankfully, Annie is unharmed, but she urgently needs a kidney transplant. In an ironic twist of fate, Maura's boyfriend turns out to be a compatible donor. At the hospital, Ondine meets Vadik again, who pleads with her to return to him, but she refuses, saying she has something important to do. Days later, after Annie recovers from her surgery, Maura, devastated by her boyfriend's death, scatters his ashes into the sea. She temporarily grants custody of Annie to Cacus on the condition that Ondine stays away from her daughter. Maura, as a personal favor, asks Cacus to have a drink with her, which turns out to be a disastrous idea. Cacus ends up drunk and impulsively goes to confront Ondine. He takes her to a nearby lighthouse, promising to show her something amazing, only to abruptly leave her there. In his mind, he rationalizes this as necessary to keep Annie by his side. Though calmly explaining the situation to Ondine would have been far less painful for everyone involved. That night, Cacus is with his daughter, preparing for their first sleepover in years, but Annie can't stop asking about Ondine. By morning, with the clarity only a hangover can bring, Cacus realizes the grave mistake he made. He hurries back to the lighthouse and finds Ondine, who had tried to swim home, but ended up stranded on the rocks. In pain and exhausted, she confesses to Kakis that she isn't a mermaid. Her reality is far darker. She's a heroin addict from Romania. She and Vadik had smuggled a large shipment of heroin on a raft, but the Coast Guard intercepted them. In the chaos, Ondine had jumped overboard, and the current pulled her under, leaving her to sink. By sheer luck, Kakis's net saved her life, and ever since, she played along with the mermaid story to keep Annie's hope alive and conceal the truth. That night, when they return home, they find Vadik and his associate waiting, armed and holding Annie hostage. They threaten Ondine, demanding the location of the heroin, what they thought was the mermaid cloak. But when they dig up the spot, they find nothing. It turns out Annie had moved the cloak, still believing Ondine is a mermaid and thinking that if Ondine never finds it, she'll stay on land. Annie eventually reveals the new location, which requires them to go out on the boat. Once on board, Ondine, aware that Vadik can't swim, takes advantage of the situation. In the struggle, Vadik ends up overboard and drowns, while the police arrive in time to arrest his associate. Unfortunately, they also arrest Ondine, who faces deportation back to Romania. But Kakis, determined not to lose her, proposes marriage to give her a fresh start. Together they embrace a new beginning, both having overcome dark chapters of addiction and loss.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.